things. I know, I said impatiently. We've been through all this before, but I'm still not convinced. Nothing will ever convince you, Harold. I wouldn't be surprised if that bunny's got you in his powers. Listen, Howie. Yes, Pop? Chester rolled his eyes and went on. You can't listen to Harold on this one. He's too much of a goody two-shoes. And the Monroes, well, what can I say? People are, alas, people, and as such woefully in the dark much of the time. They never had a clue what was going on. I was on the verge of destroying the vampire bunny once and for all, and saving this town and all its inhabitants from his evil clutches, when the Monroes whisked him off to the vet and got him put on a liquid diet. Since then, he's had no need to suck the juices out of the vegetables. A blender does all the work for him. Modern technology has once again saved the day. But, and here Chester furrowed his brow ominously, you can take the rabbit out of the vampire, but you can't take the vampire out of the rabbit. Huh? I inquired. I don't get it, Howie said, scratching behind his ear with his back paw. You can take the... Oh, never mind. What am I trying to say? Is that I still believe if, for any reason, Bunnicula were deprived of his liquid vegetables or had the opportunity to run away, he'd be back to his old tricks in no time. Howie was so aroused by Chester's story he was panting slightly. Wow, he said, trying to catch his breath. And all this time I thought he was just a nice little bunny. He is a nice little bunny, I asserted, feeling the need to defend my friend. Don't listen to Chester. Don't listen to Harold. Chester, I said. Harold. Pop, Uncle Harold, Howie barked. Stop arguing me. You're confusing me. I think I'd better run out and chase a car to clear my mind. Excuse me. Howie started down the steps when Mrs. Monroe appeared at the door. Hello, boys, she said warmly. I was wondering where you disappeared to. Howie, come back here. I've told you not to run out in the street. Rats, Howie muttered under his breath. He turned his face up toward the door and began whimpering. Now that won't do you any good. Come on, she said. It's getting late. Time to come in for the night. We're all going to bed. Howie and I, being the obedient dog types that we are, started for the door. Chester, a cat, lingered on his comic book, looking up at Mrs. Monroe with a singular disinterest. She went over and picked him up. Come on, you little cutie, she cooed. Sleepy time. Chester grimaced. Little cutie, sleepy time. Good grief, I heard him mumble. We entered the living room to find Toby and Pete, the Monroes' two sons, staring into the television set as if they'd been hypnotized. I went over to Toby's side to see what was going on. Gotcha! Toby yelled suddenly, making me jump. Pete bounced and twitched all over the floor as he frantically turned some dials back and forth, and little blobs of light darted all over the screen. Weird noises, squawks and beeps and screeches emanated from inside the television. I think our TV's possessed, I whispered to Chester, who jumped down from Mrs. Monroe's arms to join us. Don't panic, Harold, he reassured me. I'll take care of it. Slowly he skulked across the floor, his eyes never straying from the flecks of light that dashed about maniacally on the screen. Every time two of them collided, another hideous screech was heard. When that happened, Chester's head jerked, his eyes widened, and a little more hair shot up along his back. Suddenly he pounced. Here's a picture. That is Chester, and it looks like those two are the kids. With his paws racing madly across the screen, he tried to catch the screaming specks of light. Chester, Pete yelled, get out of the way. Yeah, Chester, Toby joined in. Come on, you're ruining the game. I was a little surprised at Toby, who was usually more patient than his brother. He now seemed as transformed as Pete by this strange new enterprise of theirs. All right, boys, Mrs. Monroe said, touching them lightly on the tops of their heads. That's enough star thrower for tonight. Star eater, Mom. Yeah, Mom. Geez. Star thrower, star eater, whatever. It's time to call it quits and get to bed. Toby, you want time to sit up and read, don't you? Yeah, I guess, Toby said. Chester! Chester was still busy trying to catch the elusive stars. Just one more game, Mom, okay? No, it's not okay, Robert. Mr. Monroe put down the book he was reading in a chair nearby. You boys have a big day tomorrow, he said. I think you'd better get some sleep. You heard your mother. No more star catcher. Star eater, dear, Mrs. Monroe said. I'm going to count to 3. 1, 2... Okay. Pete said, and with a click the stars disappeared from the television sky. Chester, his front paws still stretched out at the screen, looked dazed. Everybody go to bed, now. Okay, we're going. The boys started up the stairs. I planned to follow them when suddenly I noticed Howie run up to Chester and whisper excitedly, "Pop! Pop!" Chester kept blinking his eyes at the television, as if trying to figure out what had happened. "What, kid?" "Pop! What you said about Bunnicula. Your warning? What about it?" I glanced over to the rabbit's cage. "Chester!" I gasped. Chester dropped down and looked at us. "What's the matter with you two?" Howie, barely able to contain himself, blurted out, "The rabbit's gone! Look, he's not in his cage!" With a start, Chester looked at the empty cage sitting on the table by the window. "Where do you suppose he is?" I asked. "Quick!" Chester commanded. "To the kitchen!" "Where are you off to in such a rush?" Mrs. Munro asked as we brushed by her legs. "You were just fed. I'm afraid no more food has miraculously appeared in your dishes." "That's too bad," I thought, as we tumbled through the swinging kitchen door, skidded to a halt on the linoleum inside. All was quiet. The refrigerator door was closed. A bowl of fruit sat undisturbed on the kitchen table. We listened attentively for breathing, or hopping, or whatever noises rabbits make when they've run away. There wasn't a sound. "Gee, Pop, he's not here," Howie said. Chester looked wildly about, his mind clicking away all the while. "We've got to warn the Munros," he said at last. "Come on!" We dashed back into the living room. The boys had already gone upstairs, and my thoughts strayed to Toby, who was no doubt already settling into his bed with his latest book and an array of snacks. If I didn't hurry to help him out, he'd be forced to eat them all by himself. I headed for the stairs. Chester grabbed me by the tail. "Where do you think you're going?" he asked, in a somewhat garbled voice. "I'm just hearkening to the call of chocolate," I replied. "Well, hearken to this before you go anywhere," he said. "We've got to alert the Munros to what's going on. Now you and Howie start whimpering. I'll jump up on Bunnicula's cage." "Well, all right," I agreed somewhat reluctantly, "for Bunnicula's sake." Mr. Munro was turning out the lights. Mrs. Munro stood at the bottom of the stairs, ready to get up. A pile of clothes was in her arms. Howie and I ran to her side and whimpered pathetically. "What's the matter?" she asked, her voice full of concern. "Do you want some water?" She turned to her husband. "Robert, why don't you check their water dishes before coming up? I want to start folding this laundry." I noticed that Chester had jumped up on the top of the cage, but as that part of the room was darkened already, no one paid any attention. Mrs. Munro went up the stairs and Mr. Munro into the kitchen. Chester jumped down. When Mr. Munro re-entered, he stood looking down at us, shaking his head. "I don't know what your problem is, fellas," he said, "but you've got plenty of water." Once again I started to whimper, as Howie tugged at Mr. Munro's pants leg. Chester, however, began hopping around the living room floor, looking as if he was trying to make his way over a patch of hot tar. Mr. Munro just smiled at him. "Well, Chester, it looks as if you're still full of energy. Too bad we can't let you out. Good night." He patted each of us and went to bed. "Gee, Pop, are you okay?" Howie asked. "Can I help?" "You can help by not being so dumb," Chester muttered, a look of disgust on his face. "I was trying to be a rabbit." Howie became confused. "Why would you want to be a rabbit?" he asked. "Aren't you happy being a cat?" I moved toward the stairs, a lure of crinkling cellophane, covering, I hope, chocolate cupcakes, too strong to resist. Chester called after me. "Harold, take the kid with you, will you? I've got to plan my strategy." "I want to stay with you, Pop," Howie said. Chester groaned. "What strategy?" I asked. "We've got to find that rabbit and return him to his cage before it's too late." "Too late for what?" I asked. "I'm concerned about Bunnicula too, but—" "It's not the rabbit I'm worried about," he said. "It's us, you fool." I shuddered to think what could happen in one little night with that bunny on the loose. "Well," I replied, "I'll let you worry about that. I've got bigger worries on my mind right now." I went up the stairs. I could hear Chester mumbling about rabbits and vegetables and vampires, and I knew his would be a restless night. But I reassured myself. He would have Howie at his side to get him through, and what a comfort that would be. After all, just as I turned the corner of the landing, didn't I hear Howie remark, "Well, Pop, you know what they always say?" "No, son," Chester answered. "What do they always say?" "Hare today, gone tomorrow." That is a pun, because a hare is a rabbit, and people normally say here today, gone tomorrow, but they have changed it, so it's hare today, gone tomorrow. All right, main characters. Who are they? Harold is the main character. He's the one that's saying I a lot. And he is a dog. And then there's a puppy named Howie. And there's a cat named Chester. And then there are some humans, the Monroes. There's Mrs. Monroe, Mr. Monroe, Pete, and Toby. And in this chapter, what happened? Anyone? That's right. The rabbit has disappeared. The rabbit that the cat thinks is a vampire. All right. Think about what you noticed and wondered. Think about what you think is going to happen in the next chapter, and I'll see you next time.